In 2.92, it's asking us just to state or remember that light from the sun is composed of many different wavelengths. So let's talk about sunlight for a little bit. So all of this stuff here comes from the sun. So radio waves come from the sun all the way to gamma rays. Radio waves are low energy. Their frequencies or their wavelengths are very small. And when you get this way, we have higher energy. So this is important. This is important when we start talking about visible light. So this is the range that photosynthesis works best in. Photosynthesis doesn't work in this area, and it doesn't work at these high energy ones. It works in this visible light spectrum. So if we were able to look at this, we're going to talk about the absorption spectrum later, but if this is on the bottom is wavelength of this graph, and up here is like rate of photosynthesis or how well photosynthesis is working. A lot of times we talk about the absorption of the light by the chlorophyll, this pigment that captures the sunlight. Blue light, if we look at blue light, is that high energy or low energy? Yeah, it's high energy. So that means it's going to have a smaller wavelength or more high energy wavelength. So blue light is between like 400 to 500 nanometers. That is the wavelength. That is the wavelength of blue light. So if we're looking at the rate of photosynthesis, like if we were measuring it in a lab, we would have some data points up there. Green, however, which is in the middle, right? Here's green in the middle of our spectrum. Green has a wavelength of about 600 nanometers. And if we took data on that, we would notice like very little photosynthesis happening down here if we were to plot some data points. And then if we go to red, we looked at our red is on this side, more towards the low energy where our wavelengths are bigger. Red is about 700 nanometers, more or less. And we would see that there'd be some data points up here too. So photosynthesis works best at blue and red. So if we were to graph this, the absorption spectrum looks something similar to this, where you'd get these higher rates of photosynthesis near blue and red and lower down here. So that's what they want you to understand, that the sun is composed of all these wavelengths from radio to microwave to our colors, of course, ultraviolet, which can cause skin cancer, right? Because it's high energy. These luckily cannot get into our atmosphere because they rip electrons off atoms, and that would be bad. And the reason that we see plants as green, right, as leaves as green, is that this is not absorbed, right? It's not absorbed by the pigments, and it's reflected back into our eye, and we see it as green. So let's talk real quick about those pigments that do the absorbing. So the very last assessment statement that we're going to talk about here is just simply stating that chlorophyll is our photosynthetic pigment. So this is the thing that captures the wavelength. So if you can picture, like here is our chloroplast here. Inside the chloroplast, these things are called thylakoids. SLs, you don't need to know about this. HLs, you do. And on the membrane of the thylakoids are these proteins or these pigments. When we say protein, that equals pigment. They're the same thing. So they capture the sunlight. So when blue light comes in, it captures that and it converts that energy into, which we'll see, into ATP that can be used to form glucose. Or if it's red, it captures that, right? However, if it's green, it doesn't capture that, and that reflects back. So that's how this pigment works. And if you notice, magnesium is at the middle of it, and that's why sometimes if plants don't get enough magnesium, they turn yellow because they're unable to do their photosynthetic job. And if you're trying to get magnesium in your diet, eat lots of green veggies.